Thank you for joining me. I'm here with author P.W. Creighton of the book series North Shore, which takes place in a town on the coast of Massachusetts. This was a fascinating read, by the way.
Thank you.
It left me guessing who the entire time. Then hit me with a surprise ending and an unanswered question that's making me really anticipate book number 2 in this series. This book is Bad Reputation, a North Shore novel, available on Amazon.
And Barnes & Noble.
And Barnes & Noble, author P.W. Creighton. So again, thank you for joining me today. Before I get into this book, though, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about becoming a writer. I mean, what made you decide to start writing?
I've always sort of had that in me. I would be writing short stories when I was in like elementary school, stuff like that. But when I really started writing was I had gotten to this point, just started college, and there was this novel that I really wanted to read. It's like, what's this? It's like I had all these ideas about what this could be, and I kept searching and kept searching. And then I got to the point where I was like, I'm just going to write this. This is the story that's in my head that I need to tell. And I just started writing it out. And I did it all in longhand first. All on paper. And I learned my lesson really quickly after I wrote the second novel that way. That was the first series, Nightfall, with its sequel, Hysteria, and then started into the third one, Bliss. And when I got halfway into that third novel, I stopped right there and I was like, I'm going to skip a step and just type this out. It's like, ugh.
That sounds like an awful lot of work.
It was.
It was. With this book, this series, North Shore, what was your motivation to write this particular book?
Once again, it was a story that was in my head that needed to come out. And the singular moments that were sort of focused on, like this scene at the beach, where it opens, the scene at the end where it's back at the beach, and where everything has transpired to get you to that point. And it's these singular moments throughout it that I had to string that just came together. But it's also the commentary that really I want to put out there because of these topics that are so drastic. Yes.
With this book, yes, drastic. Our main character, Logan, is just a typical high school kid, or so it seems, who's starting his last day of school before summer vacation. I like how you intertwine his character with the relationships and the friendships and the romantic relationships, the student-teacher relationships, family influence on him, in such a way that you brought all these other characters in. It reminded me of when I was in high school, and it reminded me of my sons, and when they were in high school, and the things they would talk about in their day-to-day lives. The conversations that they had in the book, very realistic, very true to point, and as I kind of remember high school being. You really address that social status, that clique, that I'm with someone who's in a higher social status, so to say, than I am, and that feeling of always not knowing that, always understanding that you don't quite belong. I mean, what part of your life, your history, did you pull that from?
A lot of experience. Throughout the novel, you'll see it as a social elitism. When you're talking about a community, you talk about, for Logan, for example, his mother is the chief RN, his sister, spoilers, is a sheriff's deputy. And anywhere else in the country, that's really, you're not bad off, right? You've got your own car when you're turned like 16, and all of this. In a community like North Shore, like Cape Cod, like certain New England towns, that's not enough. You are from the other side of the tracks, no matter what you do. You have, example, in North Shore, you have celebrities that own multi-million-dollar mansions up the road, and their idea of a public school, you have this division there, still, the public school versus the academy that people go to, that other students are forced into from those different social statuses. But then, no matter what, you still have the people that run the town. Those people live there. You'll see people living in trailers. You have people that are living in rundown places, or like Logan, it's not a bad place. It's a nice house, and it's like all this stuff. And he would be better off, or well off, or even upper class, middle class, if he was anywhere else in the country. But now he's like, just like everybody else, bottom rung, because that upper crust is so much higher, and they always control everything. They control their interactions with the authority figures, whether it's the students talking to the teachers, whether it's the interactions between the police and them. Yeah. That control level is always there. So you always have this division from the lower standing that sees that and always resents them for it.
Now, you are from the New England area originally.
Yes.
I'm wondering just how much of your setup of North Shore you pulled from where you are originally from.
A lot. A lot of the characters are people that actually existed. And even, of course, as an author inserts himself, no shape or form am I ever Logan, but there's a character that's in there that's easy to identify, and it's like, oh, that's, and you know them from that perspective. Logan is this representation, and this almost a character that I knew, person I know, and everybody perceives them a certain way, which is where the title comes from, Bad Reputation. You see the actions. You see him getting into fights. You see him
skipping class.
You see him running, like racing away from the police. Mm-hmm. All of these things. He doesn't bother to explain any of it because it's gotten to that point. But from the outside, they're like, oh, he's always picking fights. He's always doing this. But when you're in his head, you understand. Why is he skipping class? He's got a piece of junk car that refuses to start. Why is he getting in the fight? He's trying to protect someone else. Why is he on the run for the cops? You see him race away from them? It's actually his sister.
Yes.
You know? These elements, and it's just seen from the outside, that perspective shift. Yeah. And a lot of people just don't grasp that, because in all honesty, and pretty much my theme for all of North Shore is, you never know what's going on in someone else's life.
Speaking of which, again, we start on the morning of the last day of school, high school, for Logan. And you do walk us through his day from beginning to end. Starts in the morning, ends at night. And again, typical, in a lot of ways, high school day with the interactions, the teacher interactions, other than the skipping class. But it ends with a party, or a choice of parties at the end of the day. The whole while, there's an underlying and a looming question of who called in to the local radio station the night before on a show called Midnight Confessions, and basically left behind a suicide note. So our underlying interworking roadmap to this particular series, this book, is which student was it? Because you knew it was a high school student. You knew it was from his high school, but you weren't sure which student it was. The police couldn't figure out which student it was. The school, the counselors, everybody's trying to figure out which student it was. And that kind of weaves into everything Logan's doing throughout his day, which as a reader, I'm reading this thinking, as I'm being introduced to these new characters, well, which one is it? Well, who is it? Well, what happened? Who is it? When are we going to find out who it was? Then again, the surprise ending. So
some people are upset by that, but if you're very careful, and as I said before, my writing style is, life is in media res. You step into a story, these characters know each other already. They're not going to be reintroducing or anything like that. So you're going to have normal reactions. But if you're watching for certain signs, you'll see it.
Why take on teen suicide?
It is a very, very dark topic that a lot of, not many, authors attempt, and some shows, but anytime they come out about something, everybody throws it up. It's like, oh, it's going to cause more suicides. The issue is, this is the thoughts. These are the things that are going on every day in any school. Everybody's been there. Anybody can identify with these thoughts, but nobody really pays attention. So when it happens, everybody's like, oh, it came out of the blue. There are always signs.
There are always, and you say that the according to the Center for Disease Control, and I'm going to reference this. Suicide is the third leading cause of death.
Yep.
between children and young adults, the ages of 10 to 24. And they're saying that 5,400 youths attempt suicide
each year.
Every year.
Yeah.
It is a very dark, very real issue. And you do address it in this book with the question of, well, who sent the note in and why? Now, we don't learn the why at the end, but we do learn the who. And the book does end with 18 committing suicide.
Yes.
Not the one who wrote the note. Out of the blue, a whole nother character. I know book 2 kind of goes into the ramifications of someone actually committing suicide.
Yes.
How did you leap from who wrote the note to who actually committed suicide to set up book 2 and how everyone deals with it? The friends, the teachers, the counselors, the police, everyone trying to figure out who this person was to try to stop something from happening, to which the person who wrote the note didn't, but someone else did.
It is, there's some personal experience in there, but what happens is you're looking at this singularly at the start, and you're just seeing sort of this mystery a little bit unfolding in the background because you're following one character going through and seeing how all of this stuff interacts. But then when we shift over, you suddenly go, holy crap, why did they? And you go back and you notice that there were signs for them. And you're like, well, why then? And that's where you can move over, and the second book picks up explaining why this person would. And when something happens that pushes someone that far, there is always a reason. And that's the question is no longer why did they do it? It's how they held on for so long despite of all of this, and then they just finally gave up at this point. And it's like, what did that? So you get this whole cluster effect, and you see it all over every time this happens. When a teen commits suicide, not only does it affect their classmates and their family, it's got a repercussion. And there are, this is why the news never likes to report on these things, what they attribute to cluster effects. Because when one friend commits suicide, it leaves a lasting impact, and it impacts everybody around them so much that eventually they see their way out is the same way. And it just keeps going, and it's identifying why, and then that singular idea of that little bit of hope where someone can identify it and something to cling on to.
2 things you said. One, you mentioned signs. There's
Yes.
always signs. And in that report, the CDC did mention that 4 out of 5 young adults who contemplate suicide do leave signs.
Yes.
In your book, where did you leave those signs?
They're very, very close things that if you're observant, you'll notice. Things like they're giving away some of their possessions without asking about anything. They're not really making plans for the future. They're not saying, it's like, oh, I'm going to do this on the weekend. They're just sort of like, I don't know what I'm doing. Stuff like that, indeterminate things. And you just sort of see this apathetic reaction to things that would normally make them excited about stuff, and it's just progressively gets worse from there.
And you mentioned from personal experience, so you've seen these signs, I'm going to say, in your own personal life, that you could draw into your book, and that probably is why it is so realistic.
Yes.
Are the signs the same?
Some, yes. The characters in here are, of course, shifted, so some of the stuff that I've seen and been through is shifted a bit because we're put it on these characters rather than what I've seen.
What you've seen in growing up in New England in a town much like this.
Yes.
So this really is a book that represents quite a bit of your past, your history, your life.
Every author inserts a huge level of that.
Another thing you mentioned was the hope.
Yes.
Now, in this book, it's kind of introduced into a character that he meets, Kayla, who runs Midnight Confessions out of the radio station, which is appropriate that we're in a studio talking about this book. Talk to me a little bit more about the hope and how that starts and how it leads into the next book, and how something so small could actually mean so much to someone who has,
if someone's having
contemplated suicide,
and they have such a horrible day, all it takes is that one thing of one person being nice, one person. Kayla originally sort of inserts herself as that whole manic pixie girl thing, pulling him off on some random thing, but we subvert that and pull it away because she's not pulling him out on an adventure. It's just the situation they fall into, and she's an interesting and likable character for that time, and she's just like, hey, we should do this, and just gets sort of roped into doing things as a huge distraction. And then you sort of see one person that just sort of cares versus everybody else that he's been encountering the entire day is either putting something on them, portraying certain things, lying, stealing stuff, causing all these different issues and more stress and pain and more horrible things to happen. And you have this one person who isn't, and they are actually wanting to hang around. And that idea of, like, maybe there's a good person out here.
One person to hang on to that can change a life and send it in a new direction, which I'm hoping I see when I read the second book. Oh.
Social
or not.
elitism can cause a lot of issues.
And then again, it has the underlying social elitism behind it because she is considered part of that upper crust.
More
and
so than
Logan,
the others. She comes from the academy.
And Logan, our main character, who, spoiler alert, is the one who sent in the
confession.
The confession, the suicide note is the confession, who is still with us at the end of the book. Hopefully he holds on to Kayla, or at least that glimmer of hope moving forward. But he does lose a very close friend.
Yes.
At the very end of the book. I want to mention 1-800-SUICIDE and 1-800-273-TALK. I have to. It is a very hard subject for many people, so I can't not mention those within this interview while talking about this book. I appreciate the book. Again, well written and in a very realistic way. Brought me back to high school with an underlying very serious subject matter. It was odd because part of me was like, I just want to know who it was. Like, it was an anticipation on such a dark subject, but at the same time you were like, hopefully it's what the kids called, it's just a prank. And then it turned out it wasn't just a prank.
That was the significant issue. You see that a lot. It's like the counselors had no idea. All the people talking, all the students around them, nobody had any idea. They're just jesting, joking about stuff. And it's just like, you don't know what's going on in someone's head. Yeah. You just don't.
He was right there in the middle of it all, and not one person that knew him, not one friend of any group that he had, sister, mother, no one knew it was him that sent in the note.
And then worse is who actually did, and you miss that entirely because you're still thinking Logan, you're still thinking what's going on with him and all this stuff. You just completely miss the character that actually will.
Yeah. In real life, it is that hard. It is that intricate that you could know someone and never really realize it until it was too late. It is those signs that are very important and to look for with friends and people that you know.
Absolutely.
I have to ask one last question before we wrap up this interview. Aside from very touchy personal subject matter, what advice would you give, including such personal subject matter, what advice would you give someone who has a story like that, whether it's suicide or bullying or drugs, alcohol addiction, whatever it may be, who wants to get that story out on paper? How would you, what roadmap would you draw for them? Start
telling the story that you want to tell. My little strategy has always been, I start off with bullet points and ideas, and just, I know this scene exists, this character exists, this scene exists, just making those notes. And as you know me, I'm a little more obsessive about things, so I lay everything out like an Excel sheet and specific styles and everything like that. But for anybody, just getting that story out there, telling someone a part of that story is enough. No one's going to steal your story. A lot of people, when they first start out as writers and want to be authors, they're paranoid that someone's going to steal their idea. It doesn't work that way. every author is inserting themselves in these stories. So when you're telling this story, you tell it to someone close to you and see how they react. And if it's something that's that close to you, they'll understand.
Emotionally, can you prepare yourself for telling a story that's that close?
It kind of goes through you when you're writing it. It depends on the scene.
and comes out in the book.
Yes.
Excellent book.
Thank you.
Can't wait to finish the series. And then I'm going to start on your new series,
Passing Strange.
Passing Strange, which...
A different little subject there. That one's more about like the hidden secrets of towns.
Yeah.
So it's what people have forgotten in their history can come back to sort of bite them in the butt.
Another great topic. Till the next time, Phil, thank you.
Thank you for having me.